Welcome. My name is Maha Jawaid. I'm the CEO of the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, RBIJ. We're an international nonprofit that works with the business community to advance justice, community safety, and an economic inclusion for all. So we're really excited about today's Rewriting Justice episode. This is a series we launched last year with our partner Libro FM at our annual Workforce and Justice Summit. We bring together authors with lived experience in the justice system in conversation with members of our business community, and we're thrilled to have Jesse Crosson, a remarkable storyteller, justice leader, and entrepreneur, in conversation today with leaders from Awake Window and Door, Joe Mason, Director of Training and Development, and Jessica Cause, Social Impact Strategist. Awake is an amazing fair chance employer, and I hear that they're building windows as we speak behind their walls, so we may be able to hear that as we move forward. So as many of you tuning in today know, this is Fair Chance Month. It's a month for us to reflect on the ways we can work together across society to make sure that justice system involvement does not lock out people from opportunity. And we often repeat the statistics. It's 1 in 3 in the US, 1 in 4 in England and Wales have criminal records. And what's more profound than just the sheer scale of that statistic is the lasting impact having a criminal record does to an individual to advance for success and opportunity, both in the US and in the UK. And so hearing more about what that looks like and feels like from people with lived experience and how the business community can respond is really at the heart of what RBIJ does. And we're proud to be able to host this conversation in partnership with our Workforce and Justice Alliance, the WJA. It's a free community of over 80 businesses working together to lower barriers for justice impacted talent through public policy reform, corporate policy changes, and narrative campaigns. And today we have 2 WJA members in conversation, Night is Day, that's Jesse's outfit, and Awake, which is where Joe and Jessica are. And all of our speakers are really amazing storytellers. Jesse has 1.4 million followers on TikTok, and Joe and Jessica have an amazing podcast, The Person Next to You. I'm going to let them describe more about what that looks like to be able to get the message out there, be able to share stories so that employers and society can better understand what it really does mean to be involved in the justice system. And at the end of the conversation, we're going to ask you to do 3 things, and I'm going to preview it from now. And the first is to read Jesse's book. You have a nice image of it behind Jesse on the wall there. You can download it, read it online, read it on your phone, listen to it all the ways. We want you to listen to Awake's podcast, especially for our employer community, to understand really what it takes to be able to integrate programming that supports talent that have additional needs having been impacted by the system. And then also, if you're a business or employer, to join RBIJ's efforts. Ideally, by joining the Workforce and Justice Alliance, you'll be in a community with other peers like Jesse, Joe, and Jessica. And so please do all those things. But in the meantime, listen in. And if you'd like to participate in the conversation, we will do a Q&A session towards the end. We're using the comment section in LinkedIn Live. So please add your questions there, and that'll be pulled in as we go along. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, Jessica, and Jesse. Thank you all so much. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mama.
And it's true. We are actively building windows and doors over here at Awake.
Yes.
So you may hear some saws running in the background, but it truly is a gift. We're really excited to be part of this conversation. We are a Awake Window and Door company involved with the Workforce and Justice Alliance, and that's been a great support, honestly. You learn a lot, and also connecting with other employers, other companies that are passionate about the work of just telling the stories and getting to know people that have a justice-involved background and removing those barriers.
Yes, yes. And so our podcast is called The Person Next to You, as Maha mentioned, and we talk with our employees, we talk with community partners, we talk with allies who are trying to change the narrative and let people know that even though you struggle, even though you've been incarcerated for some time, that you are a talented group of individuals, myself included. And we try to overcome those barriers and help employers to understand that they don't have to be risk averse to hiring people with involvement in the criminal legal system.
Yeah, so we tell those stories. And today, I mean, this is exciting because we haven't really got a chance to talk to Jesse yet,
Right.
but I don't know. We've both got a chance to read the book. So the best part of prison. And I am telling you, I have so many questions. That is going to be the challenge. Jessica and I have just been fighting over like which questions to ask and who gets to ask them.
Facts. Yes, that's happening. I want to just like jump right in if that's good with you, Jesse.
Of course, let's go. Oh no, can you not hear me?
I couldn't hear you for a moment there.
Is it better? Can you hear me now? Oh no. Well, technology.
Give us 1 second. Technical difficulties. So I will give you a heads up on what the first question is, so that when we get sound ready, you're ready to roll. So you've got 1.4 million followers on TikTok. That's a lot. So what I would like for you to do is just tell us a little bit about what drove you to start sharing your story and connecting with people on social media, writing the book. Just give us some heads up on how all of that came about.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the rest of the team can hear, but maybe you can't. So I don't know if they want us to go ahead. I can start answering that question. I just want you to be able to hear it if that's possible. But you can't hear me at all. So I guess I will start answering that, and then I will let them rejoin, and we'll figure it out from there. So I didn't start sharing my story because I had some grand aspiration or even any idea what I was doing at all. I started sharing my story because I was institutionalized, and I only knew how to do what people told me to do. So when I got out of prison, one of the first things someone said was, you have this really compelling story. You need to share it on social media. I didn't know what that meant. I really didn't understand social media. It didn't exist when I went to prison. So somebody said, go make a TikTok and talk about your life. And I said, okay. So I downloaded TikTok on the way to a hike that was this thing I'd been looking forward to for years. And on the top of a mountain, I just kind of, in very like muted, controlled, like almost, I don't know, almost coma-like, language, like described getting out of prison and being lost and confused, and it went viral. It was the middle of COVID. I had a day job, but I didn't have anything to do at night. I couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't get together with people. So I just got on TikTok at night and started making videos and telling stories. And I saw this huge engagement. I saw people asking questions and people leaving comments and people just interested in the topic. So I started doing it just kind of because it was in front of me. It was only later that I started connecting with other people who were formerly incarcerated or people in the business community that I realized that this platform is how we change culture, and policy doesn't change until culture changes. So this was actually a really powerful tool. So again, I had no idea that this was going to turn into what it did, but I just did it because someone told me to, and then because it was right in front of me. And that's how I've done a lot of things in my life that have kind of led to success.
Yeah, I think that's the huge thing, is that you just kind of like got to hear what was going on. You saw it, you experienced it, and then you just kind of engaged in everything. And I know, when I was reading your book, one of the first things that I noticed was actually, I'm going to just pull it up right here, page 25. It says, another part of me recognized that these were just excuses. So you're talking about just like, there was a moment where there was like a conscious realization that there were like these two sort of voices inside your head. And that there was a moment where, you had to make a decision of like which of these voices you're going to listen to, or at least recognized that there were two voices. Is that something you can just share a little bit with us? Because I believe that as we talk about fair chance hiring, like this is a real common thing. And sometimes we forget that is something that people are going through. Mm.
Yeah, I talk in a number of places in the book about where I feel like I was kind of divided into two, or like pulled in two different directions. A lot of times I use the analogy people use of like, you have two wolves and the one you feed is the one that gets stronger. And in that story, or that section you were talking about, that was kind of this selfish, small part of me that was just like worried about myself and this zero-sum game and not considering anyone else. And I recognized that I didn't want to live that way. Like, independent of what the conditions were, what anyone else around me was doing, I didn't want to live that way. And you're right, like that person coming in to go apply for a job is not the ideal person. But what I did, and what a lot of people inside did, was recognize that path only leads to misery. It only leads to scarcity. It only leads to less. And that actually being part of a larger community and contributing and accepting help and just being part of things was a much more meaningful thing. And that was why I mentored. That was why I tutored. That was why I read articles for publication. That was why I got involved in everything I possibly could, because I wanted to give what I had and I wanted to receive what was available, because we were all in this together. And like, especially this group of incarcerated people who were stuck in this place we didn't want to be in, but recognizing that we had a choice of what are we going to do with this time? And are we going to come out better, or are we going to come out broken? And my choice was to come out better.
Thank you so much for calling that out, because, I was inside for 15 years, and I think it's really important for people that have lived that and do have those experiences to say what the truth is about being in those experiences. And there are so many people in there making that same choice and not wanting to choose that other voice, not wanting to listen to that other part of themselves, and to want to be better and to want to grow. And a lot of times making the choices on their own without a lot of help from the internal system to make those changes. So thank you so much for bringing that forward and for being a voice. What I would like to talk about a little bit is you talk about a lot about the relationships you've built with people in prison, the people that you've come across. Yeah. And in chapter 9, you talk about no one is just one thing, right? So talk to us a little bit and expand on that idea and how it relates to fair chance hiring.
Yeah, there are not a lot of things. If you go to high school, you're not forever a high schooler. If you go to college, you're not forever a colleger. If you commit a felony, you're forever a felon. And it's one of these stigmas that stick to us and don't really serve any purpose. I think some people are scared and think, okay, well, if I identify people, then we can know who the threats are. But the reality is there are a lot of people out in the world who have committed crimes, who have committed felonies, who haven't been arrested or haven't been convicted. There are a lot of people who pose an actual threat who have nothing to do or have no history or basically no involvement with the justice system. So the idea creates false or this illusion of safety. And it's not really a threat, because what I found is people who go inside, who are accountable, who work to heal, work to make amends, and work to change are actually some of the best employees you could have, or some of the best friends you could have, or some of the best community members you could have. So when I think about what's important, it's, okay, giving someone a chance for who they are today, not for whether they played football in high school or whether they committed a felony when they were 16 or whatever the situation was. I want an employee that's going to do the best job for me. Like, in the nonprofit that I run, I have an operations person who lives in a completely different state who I kind of had to take a risk on. But what I realized was she was the perfect person for the job. She had the skills, she had the experience. It didn't matter what her history was. I didn't care where she came from. I didn't care who she was married to. I didn't care, what area she lived in. All I cared about was how good was she going to be able to show up, and was she going to add to the culture of the business? And she did.
Yeah, that is huge. And I think you get into it, like you talk about like different people that you've met in prison, but then you also talk about some of the things that were going kind of on in you also, and the work that you had to do. And I think that was, you even said it at the beginning, Jessica, like sometimes, you could be in there and you're not really doing the work, but you talked about like taking advantage of that time and doing the work, and even like you said, it was digging through the pain to find the truth, right? So you talked about that. I don't know. Can you dig in a little more to like, what is that work? What is it, what is the work that has to be done to sort of like see something change in that time?
Yeah, I think, we had the idea that the work is a bunch of certificates or a bunch of state-run classes about anger management or about something else, and it's not. Those things are, at best, something significant. Generally, they're kind of performative, they're kind of empty, they're just another checkbox that you're going down, and there's not a lot gotten from the class. But for me, it was the realization that I was struggling. I was suffering, like, long before I went to prison, and I was trapped by things that I didn't know how to free myself from. And no one who's happy and healthy wakes up and just decides to go commit a robbery or go commit a crime or go hurt someone else, that there is an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. So when I finally got to prison, I was so on fire that I didn't care what anybody thought. I was going to get all the help I could. I went to talk to the mental health professionals. I read self-help books. I meditated. I went to religious service. I went everywhere I possibly could to get whatever assistance I could, because I knew I needed to get to the bottom of what was going on that had caused me so much pain, that had caused me to cause the pain to other people that I did. And I wanted to figure out what that was. So part of that was therapy. Part of that was meditation. Part of that was self-help books. Part of that was building new habits and kind of like building a new way of living, basically restructuring a life from the shambles of what I had left from my old one. And in doing that, I suddenly realized that I was becoming a different person. I was acting in different ways. I was thinking in different ways. I was taking a pause before I acted or before I thought, before I spoke, before I did anything. And all of a sudden, I woke up one day and realized, like, I am not the person that I was. I really am not the person who would again commit those crimes or could again commit those crimes, because I've taken accountability, and by facing the things I've done the work to make sure I'm no longer in that position, because I don't ever want to do that again.
And I think that like you took advantage of all those resources. It's really important as a business, like as companies, if you're hiring people, to know whether or not like what somebody has been doing, because sometimes someone will show up and they have a big gap in their resume. Well, I haven't worked for the last, 10 years, but they have been doing something. Do you have any suggestions for, employers that might be thinking, hiring justice impacted individuals, and like, what are some of the things they can look for or even maybe ask about in the interview?
Sure. And so when I'm talking to formerly incarcerated people, I always tell them to put their prison jobs or even their prison hustles on their resume so they have something to show what they were doing. And a lot of times people don't get that message, or they're nervous. They're like, well, I can't tell people I ran a candy empire, or I made, suckers, or I made this. But the reality is that's running a business. And if an employer sees that, they're going to see it through a different lens than this person who feels like they were breaking the rules or they were just doing something to survive or scrambling. So employers can ask what somebody did with their time. And the reality is that if someone has been in prison like gambling and gangbanging and fighting, like probably not the best employer, like probably doesn't bring the best experience. But if someone has been taking classes or teaching classes or reading and studying or running a hustle or having a job as an electrician or having a job in the law library or in the factory, they bring relevant experience that could actually add to the value of that company.
Yeah, I think that is huge. And then we've definitely we've experienced that, at Awake, and we'll have those conversations, and you can tell if somebody has been, they've been doing the work while they're in there, like personally, but then also like learning skills.
Yes, and like you definitely can see like when the hustle is strong and when the hustle is intentional for rebuilding your life, rebuilding with purpose. So we've talked about kind of what things were like while you were in there, what kind of transitions you were going through. Let's talk a little bit about coming home and going to Costco, and what those experiences are like.
So for context, for people who haven't read the book, I was supposed to still be in prison. Like, my sentencing guidelines originally were 8 to 13 years. I was sentenced to serve 32 years in prison. I thought I wasn't getting out until my 50s. And then after 19 years, the governor of Virginia granted me a conditional pardon. So I only had an hour and a half's notice between when I was told and when I walked out of prison. It wasn't like I could prepare like plans or foundations. I literally went from being in shock because they told me to walking out and hugging my mom for the first time in a year and a half because there were no visits during COVID. And then, going to Costco because there was the one place I could get everything. I didn't have any clothes. I didn't have any food. I didn't have any tools. I didn't have anything. So we went to try to handle everything. And I was so overwhelmed. You think about it, like in life, you pick up a couple things, like you may get a job, you may buy a couple clothes, you may buy one tool, you may buy some hygiene. All of a sudden, to try to grasp all the things that I needed to build or put together or find a way to get to have a life on the outside, I was completely overwhelmed because I was basically taken care of in prison. Not taken care of well or comfortably, but I was told where to go. I was given the things that I absolutely needed, like the meal on the tray during the day. I either bought commissary, but I knew the set day of the month I was going to buy commissary, or if I was indigent, I would be given one of those tiny little toothpastes. And that was what I had to use, and I had to figure out a way to hustle and make it happen. But to all of a sudden sit, even in Costco, which has limited options, in front of 10 different types of pants or 10 different types of socks or 10 different types of shoes, I didn't know how to make a decision. Like the muscle that is making decisions had atrophied over 19 years inside. And I was just so unused to it that I ended up having a breakdown. I literally went to a knee and was just like, I have to go. I can't be here. I'm surrounded by people. The space is too big. There's too much noise. Like I have to go. And thankfully I was with people who understood, with my mother and with a partner who were like, okay, let's get you out of here. Let's start slower. Let's go out to the country. Let's go out where it's quiet, where it's still. And that was all I could handle.
So that leads into post-incarceration syndrome, right? Like I was inside for a long time. You were inside for a long time. During the time that we were doing time, this was a new concept. This was something that was just being talked about. And I don't know if you have similar experiences, but when I came home, I had a lot of people in my life that didn't quite understand why I was struggling the way I was, why things were so difficult sometimes, because people's thought, and it wasn't ill-intentioned, it was just like, you're free now, you're home. Why is this such a hard thing for you? So talk a little bit about post-incarceration syndrome and how employers can reframe the way that they think about some of the issues that people coming from the criminal legal system face.
Sure. I actually had a really intense therapy session yesterday about this because I still have things from childhood. I still have things from prison that come up. And in that moment, I'm panicking. I think something's wrong. I think I'm wrong. I think I need to change something. I need to get out of there. And the reality is, I love my therapist because she said, Jesse, imagine that this is just a memory. Maybe it's a mental memory, maybe it's an emotional memory, maybe it's a physical memory, but that doesn't mean that whatever you're afraid of is happening right now. It doesn't mean whatever feels so threatening or so big is happening right now. So seeing it that way allows me to frame as, okay, this panic is happening, this tightness in my chest, this overwhelm, or these things running through my mind, but it doesn't mean that something is actually here. I can stop and I can ground myself and I can be present. And I've been really fortunate to have people who've supported me in that journey. And I haven't had a lot of direct employers, but there would very well be someone has the ability to sit down and say, okay, we're here for you. If something comes up, And that was actually the conclusion of my therapy session yesterday was, okay, Jesse, when these things happen, you seem to benefit greatly from being able to connect with somebody, from being able to be vulnerable with someone who you know is safe. So in a business, if you have someone who can be that safe person, that point person, that boss, that social worker, that whatever, who can step in and say, hey, you're okay. Let's take a minute. Let's step outside for 5 minutes. Because the loyalty that you will get from that person, the support and the trust you will get from that person when you can be there when they need you most, and they will show up 10 times as much or 10 times harder or 10 times longer, is a loyalty that every business would benefit from. And so when I think about it, I always think about, can we put the person first, and can we make sure that they are in a position to be seen and validated even when they're struggling, and know that there's nothing wrong with them because they're not feeling 100% today, because struggling is a part of life.
Yeah, man, isn't that so true? Like, you're talking about just that idea of knowing that somebody is there for you. Cause I mean, I know a lot of times we'll have people come home and they don't really have anybody. I mean, sometimes there's strong social support, and then other times there's not. And it's actually the community that they meet on the job that sort of becomes the social support. So I mean, I know we're kind of blurring lines here a little bit, Jesse, but what do you think about that? I mean, as an employer, is there anything strategic that can be done around those social connections, as those are kind of recognized as such a, powerful part of success coming home?
I think it has to do with the culture of a company. Do you have a culture that is supportive and inclusive and really focuses on everyone's needs? Because if you do, you're building a team, and that team will support one another without even being asked to, without needing specific instruction. I think there are often opportunities to join like a chamber of commerce or kind of larger social structures that allow people to be a part of things. Because generally when you come home, or if you haven't gone to prison, when you're out in the world, you meet people through work, you meet people through like third spaces or faith spaces, you meet people through community engagement, but we're more and more isolated as a culture these days. There aren't as many third spaces. There aren't as many opportunities to come together and just connect with people. So often it is in the workforce, or it is in the gym, or it isn't something like that. And one of the innovative things that I've seen that I really like is more and more employers who are including things like gym membership or club membership or other things to make sure that there is a culture that exists outside of just the office, and that team experience actually exists in the jiu-jitsu gym or in the lifting gym or in the running club or whatever it is. Because when you build that team, again, people are going to work that much harder for people they know and they care about.
Yeah, we literally have like a group of people that are out there working out and like doing push-ups
during
and
lunch,
like sweating. Yeah, they got 30 minutes off and everybody's out there doing that. I think that goes back to that idea. Like, look, we have something in common, and we're building up community. People that are carpooling together. If somebody starts here and they don't have a ride, and then we don't solve that as an employer, but it just gets solved. And I think it goes to your point of like culture.
And those are the unspoken bridges that people build, right? Because we have so much more in common with one another than we have that's different. And when you start to realize that like, oh, support, I need support, you need support, we all need support. And when you show up for people like that, you're absolutely right. They're going to show up for you a million times more. What do you think about like the first 90 days of re-entry?
Yeah.
Right. The first 90 days, if someone comes out, they have a job opportunity. Outline what that could look like in a perfect world for someone coming home.
The thing I was most grateful for in my first job, there was an attorney I'd done some work for when I was in the law library in prison. I developed a relationship with, who was selling his home. And I think he saw it as an opportunity to give me some training. He's like, come over, I'll teach you to do some finished carpentry so we can get the house ready for sale. And I remember after the first day, he looked at me, he's like, I'm not sure I can teach you a lot about carpentry, because I'd grown up with a dad who did everything and I was so involved. But it gave me the chance to go out and do something tangible, something with my hands, that I got to see the results of my labor, which was incredibly gratifying. But it also gave me a space that wasn't incredibly stressful or busy. And I think about what you're talking about with like making the windows right now. And to be in a factory with the whirring noises and the stress and the bangs, like, can be a lot. And that could not be the ideal position to start out. Because when I was out there and I was, doing siding, or I was fixing the deck, or I was laying new roofing, and then I could go sit down by the pond and have my lunch and like be in the woods and be away from everybody and be fundamentally safe, that was a really amazing thing. So I think in whatever the workplace is, if there is a safe space, like not a theoretical safe space, but an actual physical safe space, a space people can go and they know that they don't have to worry about being accosted, they don't have to worry about all the noise, or the different factors that we have to consider. There aren't that many factors to consider in prison. All of a sudden, there are just a lot more variables that come up. So having that, and whether that's a lunch that people go to together, or whether that's Basically the coaching of saying, hey, let's go for a walk on our lunch break, or let's go for a walk after work. Let's sit down and kind of like debrief what's been going on. Let's talk about your experiences. Let's talk about what we can do to show up. And also let's talk about the improvements you might see. Because one of the things I love is a lot of people who are incarcerated, we're MacGyvers. We had to make something work with nothing on a regular basis. So we'll walk into a workplace and they'll be struggling with something, trying to do it like the right way or the formal way. And someone would say, well, why don't you just use that cup over there and get some duct tape and do this? And all of a sudden they've solved the problem. And it really is a valuable skill, because to be able to think outside the box and be able to see solutions rather than problems is an incredible thing. And everybody in prison has had to learn that skill, because we had a lot of problems and we didn't have a lot of solutions given to us. We had to come up with something.
Yeah, that makes me think of the like apple
Innovative solution.
Yeah, innovative. But remember, like in the book, you talk about making the apple pies. Like that was your whole thing. Like you became the apple pie guy. You're smuggling apples out in your like pants, or I mean, I don't know, but you had to get creative. And I think, am I understanding it right? Like somebody had to teach you how to do those things, right? You had to learn how to do that from somebody else, and so you speak to this like whole idea of mentoring and having teachers and finding that. And I think that's a learned skill as well. Mm-hmm. Can you speak maybe to, I don't know, maybe there's two sides. Like, is there something an employer could do to help facilitate like coaching? And then maybe on the other side, like what does somebody coming home have to do to like just go and grab it and like take the initiative, whether it's set up for you or not, to go make your own like teachers and coaches?
Sure. So I talked about this yesterday, actually. The process of getting out of prison wasn't that different at its core from the process of going to prison, because I'm going to an alien place where I don't know the rules. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know who I'm supposed to be around. I don't know the culture. I don't know anything about it. And I had to pick that up. And so sure enough, when I get locked up, there's some old head who says, hey, come here, youngin', let me tell you the game. Let me talk about this. Let me explain to you what's going on. And when I got out, there wasn't anybody to do that. There was nobody who said, okay, well, here's all the technology that's happened in the last 20 years. Here are all the things that are going. Instead, I had to ask. I had to ask everybody. I would literally stop people on the street. I remember, this is one of my favorite stories. I was in the grocery store. It was one of the first times I was in the grocery store alone, and I was trying to cook something special for my girlfriend. And I saw this little old lady in the aisle that I was in. I was buying cooking oil. And I was like, ma'am, can you help me for a second? This may sound strange, but like, I need a high heat oil. I don't really know what to use. And like, I don't know how to cook. And can you just help me? And she just stopped and she looked at me and she said, Sonny, why don't you just Google it? And I was like, okay, like clearly the world has moved on in a way that I didn't know, but it let me know that it's okay to ask questions, and that even if somebody doesn't give me the answer or someone doesn't have the answer, they can point me in a direction, or at least they're not going to like ridicule me for not knowing. And I had to be open about that. I had to ask for help. I had to do that a lot because there were a lot of things I didn't know. I literally didn't know how to exist as an adult in the world because I'd spent my entire time as an adult in prison. So there were a lot of things to learn, and having someone there, having a coach, having a mentor, having a guide, having a peer support network would have been amazing. And I didn't have that. And I think I'm just grateful that I had people who had kind of taught me the value of being vulnerable and asking for help and being willing to kind of lay myself bare so I could find the answer. Because I watch a lot of guys come out and not be willing to do that, not feel comfortable asking for help, and then just sit in their suffering, or just kind of sit in this place where they're stuck and they don't know how to ask for help because they feel like they're not supposed to or they're not allowed to.
Can I just say that tap pay was the bane of my existence for like 6 months? I had no understanding what went on when somebody was like, oh, you just tap. And I literally like tapped the card and they just looked at me like I had 3 heads. And then I was like, I was in prison for 15 years. I don't know what you mean when you say like tap. And so like the clerk at Walmart explained to me what tap pay was and how to like do the thing, you know? So I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it. And now whenever I have friends that come home, I'm like, let's talk about tap pay real quick. Move right now. How do you think we can get businesses to realize all of these things that we're talking about? How can we get businesses to realize that people are not just one thing? People are not just that blip on their background, that moment that happened in life. Mm-hmm.
There are 2 answers I have. The first is that the solution to most problems that involve different people is proximity. Bringing people into the room together, getting to know one another, whether it's over coffee or in a work event, whatever it is, because when you talk to somebody, you realize that they're a lot more than this one item on a spreadsheet or this one item on a piece of paper. And when you do that, you begin to see the values. The other thing is, I think so often like fair chance employment is framed as a charity. Like, we need to give these people a chance. when it's really needs to be focused on the fact that there are incredibly valuable talent and people that are coming out of incarceration who have a lot to offer to businesses. And when you start breaking that down and saying, okay, like we'll admit, like we will posit there is this conviction. Let's talk about all the other things. Let's talk about what they did while they were incarcerated. Let's talk about what they did as far as training, as far as education, as far as preparation, as far as hustling and MacGyvering. And once you just start that conversation, I think employers begin to see the value they can bring to their organization. And as long as it's a charity case, it's nobody really wants to do that. Like it doesn't value or benefit a business to say, okay, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do. It is. It's also the right thing to do for everyone involved. It's not just helping the formerly incarcerated person. It is genuinely adding value to the business. And let me tell you a story real quick, and then I'll leave this alone. There was a kid we saw who came out who was struggling. Nobody would give him a job, like nobody, no matter where he went. And finally, he got a job making like $7 an hour at a tire shop. I mean, this is like manual labor, like you're putting on and taking off tires all day. No matter what, he's there for 5 years. He's offered a full ride scholarship to Columbia University. And he's like, I can't, man. I owe these people. They gave me a job. Like his loyalty to this business is so great because they were the only one to give him a job. And he worked his ass off, and he's graduating from Columbia University this year. He's going to go off and make $200,000 next year. Like he is going to be successful. He had all those talents and all those skills, but the only person who saw that was the person who ran this tire shop. And he was probably taking advantage of him to some degree because he could have paid him a lot more or paid him a lot better. But the point was that kid added a lot of value to that business, and he will add value to every business he joins from here on out. But it took somebody willing to give him a chance to see that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think having the sort of perception and the eyes to see that somebody could be more than that one thing, that changes everything because people really step up to it. And sometimes not. I mean, we obviously are not framing this as like it always works out, but there are so many times where people just exceed all expectations, and that has a lot to do with that. Jesse, I'm really curious about this. So you talk about this interaction with Big Baby, right, in your book, and how because of your sort of spending time with him, it really helped you understand that there needed to be something more. There had to be like purpose behind what you were doing. So you talk about like at one point you wanted to not exist, and then you found that you had a purpose, like a reason to exist. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit, like as a company, when we talk about fair chance hiring, sometimes it's like there is something extra that it offers your company when you have a strong why. I mean, it's not just like we are just here to make money. We've talked to so many employers, and when there is a strong like purpose behind what they're doing, it seems like the quality, like the culture, everything is better. Would you just speak to that a little bit? Like why having a purpose is so important?
Yeah. I think, everyone, we need money to exist and survive on this planet. It's an important part of the thing. And I think we all would like to have more of it. It would make things more convenient. But if all we do is exist to make money, it is a pretty empty existence. And I know people like that. I know somebody who has billions of dollars and is still working 100 hours a week because it's never going to be enough. It doesn't matter how much you do. And I don't want to live like that. If somebody does, all the better to them. But when I think about the opportunity you have, and some of my favorite business owners, when I talk to them, they don't talk about how much money they're making and their profits. They talk about their employees and how much they care about them and how much they support them. They say, I want to be able to give a meaningful wage or a meaningful existence or a meaningful culture to everyone who is a part of this team. And they see it as a team. It's not, okay, I'm going to use these people for their labor and then give them the least amount of money as possible. It's, I want to build a strong group of people. I want to build a strong culture. I want to build a strong community because we all benefit from that. And it's not just what comes out on the ledger sheet or how much your profits are at the end of the year. It's how full are you at the end of the year? And when I look at businesses that are very kind of exploitive and really like cut every corner and, take the kind of private equity model to trim off all the fat, especially if the fat is people. And I look at the people who actually invest in them, who have events outside of work, who have a culture, have a check-in, have an open door policy, actually invest in their employees. And they tend to be a lot happier, a lot more connected, and a lot more human rather than the kind of mechanical greed that I see often running companies.
Definitely.
100%. We've got some questions coming in from the audience, and I want to hit a couple of those. One of the questions is, what are employers missing when they ignore stories like yours?
So there's a plus and a negative to this, or a plus and a minus. I want to be clear. Sometimes when I have social media success, or I'm able to publish a book, or I'm able to start a nonprofit, or I'm able to start a business, people expect that should be the baseline for every person getting out of prison. And that's just not fair. And that's not realistic. there are people who've done a lot more than me, and there are people who are going to do a lot less than me, and there's no right to that. So the idea that, okay, well, everybody should look this way or should perform in this way or should have these skills, that's just not realistic. Not everybody coming out of Harvard is going to be a good employee. Not everybody coming out of jail is going to be like, we have to be realistic about the fact that people are individuals and we have to treat each person as an individual. Now, that said, when people miss these stories, let me tell you, I am kind of inundated with job offers on a regular basis. Like if I ever decide to pivot from the things I'm doing, I got a million directions I could go in because people have taken the time to experience that proximity, to sit down with me over tacos or over a consulting project or over something else and say, you have value to add. Like, I want you to be a part of this team. What do we have to do to steal you away from this other project? So there is value there. And I didn't even see it in myself until people started to reach out and say, hey, I see this and I want this and I need this. So businesses are basically missing out on opportunity because when you look at the number of people, like Maha said, starting off, 1 in 3 people in this country have criminal records. So if 1 in 3 people, and say that we, 10% of that population is extraordinary, has the specific value or the specific skill business is looking for, you're discounting a whole lot of people. You're discounting millions of people, and you're saying you're trying to have the best approach for your business. That isn't even responsible for yourself, for your business, for the culture of your business, for your shareholders if you have them, for anyone. So it's really just recognizing that, like we said before, like no one is one thing, but can we look at what is offered by this individual? Can we separate the things that were in the past from the things that are now? And can we be honest about the things now? Because there are a lot of people who have skills that are in dire need by businesses while businesses are saying we can't hire skilled employees. So maybe you just have to broaden your scope of what you're actually willing to consider.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to a quote that you have in here where you talk about talent. So this is on page 115. It says, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And sometimes that talent is missed because something comes back on a background check and they don't get to experience like all of the benefits of hiring a great employee because they were missed. So can you just speak to maybe like if we zoom out a little bit and we're kind of sitting more at like a broad level of, I don't know, what do you think is the responsibility of businesses? Like, is there a responsibility of businesses? Like, we have an opportunity to be a part of the solution. Like, what does that look like? What role do corporations have in creating a more just workplace and community?
And systematic change.
Just answer all of that.
Yes.
All of it at once. I mean, we have policymakers who are tasked with solving problems. The reality is a lot of those problems will be solved by corporations, will be solved by companies who institute their own policies and their own practices. Because we could have fair chance employment as something put into law, or we could just have major corporations recognize we benefit from this as much as the people we hire. So therefore, we're going to make this a standard practice, and basically no one is going to not do it. So all of a sudden, we've accomplished the same thing. And so it really is recognizing where there is power and where we want there to be power. And in some cases, it can be scary to have corporations that have all this power that we wanted to give to elected officials. In other cases, there's the ability to do great good and create great social change and make a great social impact. And I think it really just comes down to, again, what do you want at the end of the day? And I think some of those people are in this mindset of a zero-sum game where they're just trying to amass as much as they can, like Scrooge McDuck, and they're probably not going to be a part of the change because, again, they're only worried about the kind of data or the metrics. But when they look at the culture, when they look at the impact, and they remember that, like I said, we are all in this together. Like, regardless of which company we work for, regardless of what area we live in, we are all in this together. And the more we support people, the more we build community, the more we build an inclusive kind of contributing environment, the more we are going to be given, the more we are going to receive, the more we're going to experience. And so ultimately, I really hope that that can be the direction we go in. And more businesses I talk to are having that approach because they're recognizing, like, yeah, we want to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem.
Agreed. And I think for us, so many times what we talk about is like, we want this company. I mean, everybody has a life outside of here. We're not all just like coming to work and that's all that we do. So let's use this as a tool to make a difference in our own lives. But you're also saying like, let's, as a company, let's use what we have as a resource to make a difference in our community as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we're going to kind of transition at this point. We want to really focus on any questions that are coming from the audience. Thanks for letting us just pepper you with all the hard ones right now. If anybody is watching or listening on LinkedIn and you want to just go ahead and type any questions into the chat, feel free to do that. And we'd like to really turn it over to you guys to have a chance to ask Jesse any questions that may be coming up, either, from this conversation, or maybe you've already read his book or you're following on TikTok. I did hear, Jesse, that it sounds like you're very, and we talked to Nadia, one of our coworkers here. Mm-hmm. She said she's really following you a lot on TikTok. It sounds like that's one of the things you do is you field a lot of questions, and you're just constantly people are curious, and especially folks that haven't been to, prison. Can you just share what do you think is one of the things that comes up most often? What are the topics that people are asking the most questions about, from your kind of social media?
Sure. I think there's a lot of kind of voyeuristic interest in what goes on, especially the salacious things that go on. People want to know, did this happen in prison? Did this ever happen to you? Or did you ever see this happen? But I think some of the meaningful questions are about what is the daily experience? People want to know the odd details that to me didn't seem significant. They're like, what do you eat? And when do you eat? And what does that look like? And when you get out, what kind of support do you have? Because I think, if we don't have contact with the criminal legal system, we don't really think about it. It doesn't come to the front of mind unless we or someone we know is involved. And we just kind of assume that it works, or that it works for a reason, or that things are going smoothly. And it isn't until people hear the reality of what actually happens in a prison, or what actually happens when people get out, that they're like, hey, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We're not really setting people up for success. We're not really setting things up for public safety. This doesn't make a lot of sense. Can we do things differently? So a lot of the questions around what the actual experience is, and then what solutions we could have for it. And I'm really grateful, here in the state of Virginia, there's a lot of conversation between businesses and the government about how we can improve success after reentry. Basically, when someone gets out, how can we make sure that they have the tools and they have the resources they need to succeed? Because saying, oh, well, you just got to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, that sounds great. But the reality is, if we care about public safety, we care about investing in people enough to make sure that they don't go back to prison. They're not desperate enough to turn back to old measures, because they actually have a path forward. There is a legitimate path in front of them.
Yeah, that really is where you start to see that change, those stories being told.
It's so important to include the voices of impacted people when you're talking about those decisions and talking about what those pathways forward look like, because for the longest time, it was people reading books and doing studies and looking at a limited amount of research saying this is what people need to do to be successful, but not talking to the people that have been there, that have done the time, that are experiencing the barriers and the challenges when you come home to try and rebuild your life. And also talking to the people that, go back 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times, and saying, what is it that keeps bringing you back? What can we do when you come home to help keep that from happening again? Do you feel that there's a responsibility or a weight on your shoulders now that you've shared your experiences, you've written this book, you have this following on TikTok and social media? Do you feel a responsibility to continue talking about this and pressing forward and helping to be a part of the solution?
Interesting you asked that. So a lot of the things that I've done, when I started, I didn't realize this, but I was doing out of survivor skill, because I received a pardon and I walked out of prison, and lots of people who did just as much work as I did didn't. And I felt tremendously guilty and unworthy of that. I know I worked hard in prison. I know I did a lot. Nonetheless, it feels unfair that I got this chance when other people didn't. So in the beginning, all the advocacy I was doing, all the service work I was doing, all the videos to some degree were coming out of that place of I need to advocate, because I need people to know that what's going on doesn't make sense, and that there are other people who are deserving of a second chance. And I think part of being successful, whatever that means to the world, is my kind of shining light to the world that hey, there are people like me in prison. There are people who have things of value to add. There are people who deserve to be treated humanely in prison. There are people who will benefit not only from their experiences, but also will bring that benefit out to the world, to your companies, to your communities, to your families, to your areas. And I want that to be the truth. So I think I do feel a responsibility to some degree. But that was one of the things I was grateful for with writing the book, is I feel okay, I've now created this thing that will outlast me, or maybe the videos will outlast me. We're entering a new world. But if I choose to go in a different direction, if I choose to go into business, if I choose to go into something else, rather than really focusing on the mission and focusing on the direct service work, I feel like I've done something that will outlast me, and that I have a little bit of that responsibility lightened off my shoulders.
Yeah,
that hits. That hits so hard. You have no idea, because I share a similar feeling. There's so many incredible people that are still inside, that don't have the opportunity to come home, or probably don't have the opportunity to come home. So shining a light on that, it means a great deal. And I know that you know that.
Yeah. And I have this great opportunity to meet somebody like Jessica, or, now getting to hear your story, Jesse. And it's this just shatters the mold. It breaks the mold of when you think of somebody and you're saying, hey, we're doing this fair chance hiring. Oh, and you mentioned this already, Jesse. It's not like we're doing, being, it's not charity. It's just good business. It just makes really good sense. So that just reinforces it. We got a couple of questions that we want to get to that are coming in from the audience. I'll read this one. It says, we'd love your suggestions for juveniles to best prepare for reentry. What programs, services worked for you?
Yeah. Interesting. I was doing a presentation yesterday, and the head of a juvenile detention center down in Newport News asked me the same thing. He said, hey man, like I'm in charge of this programming. Like what works? What do I need? What can we do? And there are a lot of things. The reality is that when I do work in the juvenile detention center, often these kids, it's not a matter of a barrier between the steps they actually need to take. It's an internal barrier of believing that they're worthy of or deserving of or capable of those things. So one of the things I always talk about with programming or employment, especially in incarcerated settings, is giving people the opportunity to realize that they can. Like give them a problem, give them a task, let them get good at a skill, whatever that is, whether that's doing electrical work, maybe that's organizing books in the library, maybe that's college. It doesn't really matter what it is. People beginning to see in themselves the ability to create and contribute rather than kind of like take or feel like a burden on the world was a really difficult shift. And you asked about Big Baby earlier. So this was a guy who I helped get his GED. And in return, I basically asked him to teach me how to box because someone had told me early on that if someone has never gotten anything for free, if you offer something for free, they're not going to trust it. They're going to think it's a trick. But don't charge them something they can't afford to give. So he was a heavyweight boxing champ. So I said, okay, you want me to teach you? Teach me how to box. And just in that moment, the shift that he had, the smile in his face when he was like, oh, wait, I'm not burdening this person. I have something to give. I have something to share. I have something of value. And just in that moment, there was a change. There was a transition with him. So I think so often it's having programs or having opportunities where people begin to see that they are capable of contributing, they're capable of change. And that can be employment, that can be academic, that can be therapeutic, that can be anything. It's just really giving people the understanding that they have something to offer and that they are worthy. And once that happens, the actual steps to the change we're looking for are a lot easier to take.
Man.
So true, right? I think we use the term mastery a lot here. And that's like somebody shows up and they don't know how to build a window. But quickly learn that, and you gain just a couple little skills, and you're saying like, but you also show up already with a lot of skills. So just recognizing those and pulling them out, yeah. And
then seeing the confidence in someone, seeing their countenance change, seeing the way that they move in the world change when they know what they know, and they know that they can contribute.
You got this.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Another question from our audience. How would you advise employers to evaluate a formerly incarcerated candidate for their chances of success at their company?
So I love what you talked about before, which is asking them what they were doing, just having a discussion, whether it's on their resume or not. Say, tell me how you spent your days. Tell me how you spent your time. Tell me what you did with your time. Tell me what you were interested in or what you were reading or what you were working on. And I think just having that conversation first, just showing a genuine interest in the person, but also that tells you a lot about what somebody built. Because again, if we're thinking about like feeding the two wolves inside of us or the two parts of us, were you feeding the part that was curious and engaged and learning and growing, or were you feeding the part that was like numbing and running away, or again, the kind of activities that exist in a prison that are not particularly helpful? I think just having that conversation and then finding out where people's interests lie, finding out where they were, one of the things I often ask kids is, okay, before any of this, before you got into trouble, before you got into gangs, before you got into drugs, like tell me something about yourself. What were you interested in, or what were you good at, or what was that thing that stood out to you? And you'd be amazed at some of the conversations. Like this one kid who was just like, I always just wanted to play violin. Like, I don't know, I never saw a violin, I never had one, but I just always wanted to play violin. And I was thinking like, okay, this kid has this like innate desire. He has this creative urge. He has this desire to create and be artistic and be musical. Like that's something we can push him in the direction of. Like, how can we provide him resources or stepping stones to get there? And if you're an organization that hates music and hates creativity, probably not going to hire that person. But if you are, and you value those things because you want to be innovative and you want to have a new approach, you may have a really good employee on your hands. You may have somebody with a lot of potential that you can nurture and bring out. And that, I think that also comes down to it is some employers want people to come in the door ready. They're like, okay, I want you to have gone to Harvard and got your certification to be up to date. Other ones say, no, I want somebody who's raw so I can shape them into what I need. I can shape them to what we need to best benefit the company. And by doing so, we can give them a lot of skills. It's not just taking from them, it's also contributing.
Yeah, he's answering all these questions so well. Jesse, it's like you've done this before or something.
This is not your first rodeo?
We're just like nodding. Yes, absolutely. So maybe we turn it to you a little bit. Like, are there any questions that didn't get asked during this conversation that you're like, well, we missed one, or something that you want to cover that we maybe didn't hit on?
So it's interesting because I think about the business side of it, and what I've seen in a lot of employers, in some cases, not just employers, sometimes people who just give it to somebody a chance by renting to them, someone who give them a chance by kind of inviting them into their community, but employers as well, is that generally when I've seen people open that door and not do it recklessly, but do it with a little bit of intention, do it with some focus, they've gained a lot. Like I've seen people whose lives are richer and are better because of kind of taking on this cause. And this cause, again, isn't charity. It's a cause to see everyone as a human being. It's a cause to recognize the value in people and recognize what is needed by people. And I just see people live richer lives as a result of that. So again, I really want to make sure that we're not framing fair chance employment as a charity case, as something we have an obligation to do because of some moral component, but it's something that really and truly benefits everyone. It's something that really gives people the opportunity to live a deeper, richer, more meaningful life. And at the end of the day, especially in the business community, it can be really easy to get caught up on the dollars and cents. I know I do. Like I just bought a house and everything in the world is broken on this house, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for it. But at the end of the day, what I do is I sit from my window and I look out and I realize that I have a place that feels like home and a place that feels safe and a place that feels meaningful. And that is worth all the money that it's costing, and that's worth all the problems. And I think if businesses take that approach that, hey, let's make this a safe and a meaningful place. Let's make this a home. Let's make this a space for everyone on our team. All of a sudden, everything in the culture will shift and we'll see a lot more benefit for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Yes, congratulations on your home, by the way. Having a space, having your space,
safe
is
space,
so amazing.
Yeah.
I have one more thing. So let's say we have an employer listening today. They agree with everything. They're nodding along. They're on board. They want to get started, but it can seem daunting and they might not know where to begin. What is something that an employer can do this week to move in the direction of adopting fair chance hiring practices?
Sure. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as we had an organization that does Flagger Force that gets a lot of people hired for projects. And the person who sat on the board of a reentry initiative that was all about employment had a policy in his company they didn't realize he had, that they would not hire formerly incarcerated people. So this guy had to go to him and be like, hey, man, you sit on the board of this organization. Like, do you know what your actual, your policy is? Do you know what's actually happening there? So I think sometimes it's just asking the question. If someone wants to say, hey, do we have any barriers to someone who has been incarcerated or someone who's been convicted of a felony years ago or decades ago? Do we have any barriers? And if we do, what do we want to do about that? So sometimes just starting and having that conversation or asking that question is really the first step. And the second part I would say is just have those conversations. Be willing to have that conversation with the person who comes in the door. Be willing to have that conversation with somebody who applies. Be willing to have that conversation and see if it works for you. Because you know what? Not everybody who comes in the door, again, whether they're from Harvard or from jail, is going to be the right person for you, but you won't know until you have that conversation. So I don't tell anyone what to do. I don't tell anyone what's right and wrong. I just say you will probably benefit from being open to an idea and having some conversations and seeing what value could be added.
Jesse, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing yourself, your story, being vulnerable, putting everything out there, and being a voice for a community that needs more voices. I truly enjoyed our conversation today, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to be here and to share the way that you do. So I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity. If you haven't read it, read the book, people. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, and I appreciate, Jesse, one of the things you did is you went kind of like, you got into the details of what it was like in prison. You got into the details of what it was like coming home. And for somebody who hasn't necessarily experienced that, it does create empathy and some understanding and that proximity that you're talking about. So that the next time somebody does come through the door and they're applying and maybe there's something on their background, you are open to that conversation. And that's a great suggestion just to be able to move forward. So thank you for all those answers. And we're going to go ahead and transition it back to Maha's going to explain how we're finishing up.
Really, how I'm finishing up is with a big thank you. We're so grateful to all of you, to Jesse for you telling your story and all the ways that you do, and for putting out this book. And Jesse and I only just met at the end of January. Your willingness to participate and join, not just the Workforce and Justice Alliance, but also this conversation. We're so grateful to you. And to Joe and Jessica and Awake, you guys are phenomenal. And we're all very much envious of your setup for your podcast. I encourage everyone to listen. I've listened to all of the episodes. They keep dropping. Find the way that you can on all the different platforms to listen to and follow along and understand their journey as a business, creating opportunity for all, but also the ways in which they can share their experiences so that other businesses, other employers can do the same. I mean, really, our work is not possible but for partnerships and for the leadership of individuals who are willing to share their stories like you, Jesse and Jessica, but also for businesses like Night is Day and Awake and the many others who are participating today in the conversation by participating in the chat and really just being part of our community. So the wrap up is to say, again, please go purchase Jesse's book, listen to it, understand more about his story. It's remarkable. Listen to Awake's podcast. Really, it's a great one to listen to, and share it with your colleagues and friends who might be curious about what it means to be part of a community like this. And another way that you can get involved is to think about the ways you can join RBIJ's efforts. You can subscribe to our newsletter to hear more, but also you can really explore the Workforce and Justice Alliance. Again, all that we do is without a fee. We are here purposefully to support our business partners, our employers, to be able to be part of this journey to advance reform, advance corporate change, and narrative change. And obviously today is a great example of narrative change. So with that, we'll close things up. This will later be posted on YouTube. You can share it with your friends and colleagues. And again, thank you so much. Grateful to you all. Happy Fair Chance Month.